Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello everyone and welcome to Bouncing Back, the Personal Resilience Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bouncing Back. In case you're wondering why Tia's not here today, she's busy, so I'm standing in as your host of the day, and I hope you'll enjoy the journey and the conversation with me today, and Tia will be back next week. In the meantime, we have Janis Whitlock with us on the line, and I'm very excited about our conversation today with her. The topic of today is finding strength to live. And the reason that we wanted to talk to Janis is because she is an academic, a scholar, and a practitioner in the areas of adolescent and young adults' mental health and well-being. And she's particularly experienced in the areas of non-suicidal self-injury and suicide prevention. Janis is also a really kind soul because we had to reschedule this conversation and, it's been going well. And she's been following up with us, staying in touch. And I think after a few months, we are making this happen. So I'm excited about the conversation. But I also want to make a disclaimer that this is a sensitive topic. I am not an expert by any means, and any advice or anything that we'll share on the show from my perspective would be just another human's perspective. Janis might have more expert advice to share with us, but I do think in the interest of honesty, it still might get triggering. So in case you get triggered, definitely, exit and not listen to this anymore. If you need some space to yourself, if you feel like you need help, definitely reach out to, the help hotline in your local area. We'll try to link our resources in the description below as well. But with that, let's get started. And again, thank you, Janis, for being here.
Thank you, Lou. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Awesome. So I really want to invite you, first of all, to perhaps share a bit more about yourself, anything that you're comfortable sharing with our listener, because obviously what you're doing is really niche, very important to our society as well. I'm a bit curious about how you got here, and perhaps if you want to share a bit more about your expertise, because you did mention earlier that you do even more than what was introduced. So it'll be great for you to share more about yourself with our listeners.
Okay, sure. Happy to do that. I have been working in this area one way or another. And by this area, I mean adolescent and young adult mental health and well-being really broadly conceived for over 30 years. And, it's like you don't always know exactly what you want to do when you grow up. I was the same way, except I always had an interest in helping people thrive. And I always had an interest in social and emotional health and well-being. So I started off my career as a sex educator, actually. I did that after college and I loved it. I thought I would do it forever because you always have everybody's undivided attention, right? No matter how old they are, what we're talking about. And it also touches on all these areas of life because our sexuality is also about our relationships and our capacity for intimacy and our capacity for connectedness and our basic human needs. So that then, morphed into a variety of different things in that area. And then I ended up, for a number of reasons, going back after getting a master's in public health to keep doing more in that area, going back for a PhD in human development. And part of the reason I did that is because it was really obvious to me after then about 10 to 12 years that so much of the things that people were sharing with me, because one of the other things about being a sex educator is that people will come and share life stories, and sometimes they're really hard, is that it really had a lot to do with relationships, the situations that we're born into or that we are raised up with, and our sort of inherent, our inherent sense of safety in the world, I think. So that really drove me to fascination with social and emotional and mental health and well-being. And I really wanted to work on that. So all my doctoral work was on connectedness and resilience, which we'll be talking more about today. And I really wanted to understand, especially how is it that hard, dark nights of the soul, hard journeys through life, even if they're kind of long, help us thrive. Like, how is it that humans can turn really hard things into wisdom, into care for other people, into deeper compassion? Not everybody does that, as you know. A lot of us just kind of get brittle and we kind of break, and it's not so pretty and doesn't feel good. But it's amazing how many of us can, at some point or another, use what we have gone through to grow. So I was kind of interested in that. And then the self-injury project came up in 2004 because there was just more and more reports of people doing things like cutting in order to feel better. And there was almost no research on it. So I started what I thought would be a small research project. And that was in 2004 or 5. And then here we are.
Wow.
It has never, ever fully ended. It morphed into lots of other things. I also do stuff related to social media and mental health, because as you know, that's a question everybody has. How much is that affecting our mental health?
Yeah.
Complicated answer, really. And then areas related still to sexual health and development. I still do some of that too. So that's more about me.
That's why you said there's just part of the picture of what we introduced at the beginning. I was like, oh, I'm intrigued. Please tell me more. Thank you for sharing. And I think that's a really incredible journey, because you sort of started from one area and you went into a completely different one in a way. Perhaps there's still some links here and there, but I feel like if anyone hears about this, the start point and the current point, they'd be like, what? That's so interesting. Yeah.
Because I thought about that. I'm really attracted, turns out, it's the things you learn about yourself as you age. I'm really attracted to things that make people nervous. So sex, self-injury, suicide, right? Those are all things. And so it's not just, I don't go there because it makes people nervous and I delight in making people nervous. It's more like I go there because I think there's an authenticity. There's a way in which raw life is really much more visible in those edges. And that's what I'm interested in. You're like, what is it? What are we? What can I learn about the human experience and the human journey that's not so cloaked in all the things that we take on as we, to look good and feel good and appear professional, all that stuff. I like the stuff on the edges because I think that's where I'm going to learn the most. So I think that's why I've always gravitated there. Yeah,
I understand. Yeah, I think for me, it sounds like your interest in this area is one thing, but there's that strength to talk about it. And today we're talking about, strength, right? So there's that strength to actually talk about it as well, because not a lot of people are comfortable talking about this topic. And I understand, for a reason. So we'll definitely dive into that in a little bit. But before we go into the serious part of this podcast, I want to ask you for some recommendations just to get to know you a little bit better. So as we outlined, there'll be 5 things I'm going to ask you. And this is our way to get to know you better and also to get some recommendations from you. Okay, this part is going to be called Have You Met Janis? So the first thing that we want to get a recommendation from you is a book. What should we read?
Oh, gosh. Well, I thought this was about things that inspire me. So I'm not, you do not feel like it has to be a recommendation for you, but I'll tell you.
If it inspires you, that works as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the books I'm reading right now that I'm really enjoying and I would recommend is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kilmer. It's about our relationship to the earth, which seems particularly important in this moment. And it's beautiful and really well done. I'm also reading Neil deGrasse Taylor's Starry Messenger, which is a whole another topic. It's sort of earth and heavens. So those two are combined.
Yeah. Thank you. I've never heard of those books before. I'll put them on my list. Never. Definitely interesting read. Always on the lookout for good books. I feel no pressure to say these are recommendations, but share whatever comes to your mind, what sparks joy in you. So the second one would be a movie. Which one comes to your mind first?
this one was a tricky one. I was thinking about it because I haven't watched a lot of movies. I don't know. There's so much else that I tend to do with my time that I don't spend a lot of time watching TV or movies. However, I did watch recently, as I'm sure lots of you did, Avatar, The Way of Water. This was the second one and I really, really like the concepts in there. I know the fantastical part actually really appeals to me, but I also think there's some implicit struggles that reflect kind of us here and now. And, the good guys win. So, in my mind, the good guys win, or at least they make wet progress. So that's good. And it's just really good theater. It's just, you can disappear for a good hour and a half or two and a half hours. Actually, I think it's pretty long.
Yeah, well, you convinced me. I've had a couple of hectic months. I still haven't got around to watching it, but yeah, now that you said it, I'm gonna make it
You're gonna try.
A thing on my to-do list. So this is a must-ask question. We're on a podcast with you, but which podcast do you frequent?
Well, this also was a tricky one. I think I'm going to go ahead and recommend the Happiness Lab podcast. I really like those. There's a lot of interesting tidbits to take away. It always leaves you feeling uplifted. And there's a lot of like, oh, I didn't know that, is like kind of aha moments. So that's the one I would take.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Next one is your famous role model, or I'd like to ask sometime, if not famous, then your personal role model.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because this was really a tough one for me. There's a lot of people that came to mind, and I'd say, most of my personal role models are personal role models. They're people in my life that I watch how they live their life, and it's hard to do that with celebrities or anybody else. Anybody who appears on the screen anywhere, you're only seeing a fraction of it. So I have a few friends that I just adore and who are wonderful role models for me. But if I am going to give a role model that's sort of out in the world that people might recognize, I'm going to go right now with Greta Thunberg. And a lot of young people, there's just a lot of young people who are really, I don't expect young people to lead us into the future. That's we're all going there no matter what. But I feel like my generation really has to step up and do as much as we can. But members of the generation just below me and then Gen Z and beyond are really inspiring to me. So the movers and shakers that are making big waves and getting a lot of blowback. Way to go. Keep going.
Thank you. And all of these, I wouldn't say recommendations, but these things that you've just shared recently, they sort of have a theme to them. I think you know what the theme is. Yeah. It's all sort of interconnected in one way or another. And I think you wanted to talk about this a little bit later as well. Perhaps we'll touch on it a little bit. So we'll save that for later. But the final one is interesting to me, is a course you have completed that comes to your mind that you would like to talk about.
This was the hardest because it hasn't been a long time since I've taken any courses. Like I designed courses and give them, but
I was about to say.
Yeah, the last course that I took was by a spiritual leader named Shanti. And I think it was like an 8-week course and we met once a week. And I don't actually remember the specific topic, but I think we were talking about virtues and qualities that we wanted to be able to embody as we, go through our life. Things that we felt like we already did well. And then most especially areas we wanted to improve. So that was the last course I took, and that's one I'm going to tell you.
Oh, cool. Interesting. Thank you. Alrighty. So that is it for this part of Have You Met Janis? I don't know about our listeners, but I've got to know you a little bit better. I can sense your interest, besides your professional work, and, understand a bit more about, what you tend to spend your time on, and, besides your research and other work. So that's very interesting to know. And again, this is only part of who you are. We're going to get to know you even better, and especially get to know your expertise better in the next part. We always start our main part of the interview and, sort of the key part of this podcast with going broad. So the broadest question, obviously, because this show is about personal resilience, is what is resilience to you and why is it so important in our lives?
Oh, gosh. Well, I mean, resilience is something every human being has to some degree or another. But resilience can be specific to a context. Like, we can be really strong in some areas and not in others, and it can be also, it can change with time and experience. But the one thing about resilience that's super interesting to think about is you don't usually know you're resilient until you have push up against something that causes you to use your resilience. So you don't have the experience of yourself as resilient. You often don't even know that you have a particular strength until it gets required. I should say resilience is sort of we say it's the ability to bounce back, but I don't really love that because it kind of goes to, it kind of references a past that often isn't the experience. So typically what will happen is that an event will shake us down to our core maybe, or really, hurt us, damage, or take something away, a loved one, or, I don't know, something we depended on in life. And by doing that, it changes us. It forces us to sort of step in really a lot of discomfort, usually a lot of uncertainty, a lot of confusion. These are all things that can go along with events that then require resilience. And then the human experience of resilience is then still living. It's like, I still get up. I still am alive. Like, just because it feels like it's going to devastate me, it doesn't. That's the experience of resilience. And resilience doesn't have to be pretty, and it doesn't have to mean you're strong. You're feeling like, whoa, I'm strong. It's not that. It's you're still here. Yeah. And then you're beyond still here. Then maybe the pain lessens over time. Maybe the feelings of hopelessness or helplessness start to slowly diminish. And eventually you get to the point of, I'm okay. And maybe even more, I now understand I have a strength inside me I didn't have before. That's why I don't like the idea of bouncing back. It's not about going back. It's actually, it's about not fighting the change that comes with hardship and allowing it to grow you and strengthen you, even when it really, really hurts. So that's the way I experience resilience. And every single human on the planet eventually ends up having experiences that sort of test their resilience. And you can be like super resilient in one area, and then you can have another experience. You're like, whoa, it just floored me. But we still, the ground of resilience is just getting up. It's like, you're still here. Take it slow, take it day by day, and watch how the change happens.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Actually, that's really detailed and like sort of enlightening in some ways to me, and I guess to some of our listeners at least. But the funny part about it is the name of the show is Bouncing Back, and
I know.
and I have a story to tell you. So when we were designing all the shows, we went through this like whole process of brainstorming the names, and we were like, what should we name the show? Because like there's so many names out there that have already been taken, and we also have ideas, but we don't know if they actually like either they ring or if people would resonate with them, because the show is about resilience. And I think one of the names that I really liked that didn't make the cut was Building Blocks, because I feel like that was probably more, like, to me at least, like, and this might go into the misconception parts. And again, the name of the show is the name of the show, but the show covers so much more. I think it's just like a funny thing that you mentioned that might make listeners wonder. Yeah, guys, but your show is named Bouncing Back. So,
and I would say that there is an element of that to resilience, because often, you can just feel like you're devastated, and eventually you can feel like, oh, I'm okay again. So that's the sense of, I'm back to feeling like I can live my life and breathe again, and maybe even be happy again. So that's the bouncing back part. I would say that totally fits.
For sure. I think for me, I used to prefer the name Building Blocks, because it's not about bouncing back only when it comes to resilience or personal resilience in particular. I feel like for all of us, it's very important to learn the skills or know about the topic, even when we don't really have anything to sort of have to go through and deal with regarding this area. So, for example, today's topic, I have no experience in this area. I've never felt this way, and I know that for me it might be a bit harder to talk to you about it, even because I have very limited knowledge. But on the flip side, there's an opportunity for me to learn about it. So that's how I see resilience as well. It's not about, oh yeah, you're going to learn to bounce back when it happens, but it's more so, building the little skills here and there and, picking up insights when you can. So then when something happens, you have the tools already and you don't struggle because, I haven't, got into a situation where I have to struggle with, suicidal attempts. And, I'm very grateful and thankful. But I also know that for a lot of people, it's not like that. It might be that little things trigger them. And for me, I did not deal with something so horrendous that, made me think about having suicide or anything like that.
No.
But obviously in my life, I've gone through, little things here and there that definitely made me struggle. And I feel like sort of the concept of building blocks really resonated with me. And I'm not debating the name of the show anymore because it's our show. We love our show. But just sort of like a little discussion about what you just said made me realize that it's, this is how it came to be. And this is what the show is about because, we on our team care about all of our shows, even though I'm on 2 other shows. I love this show and I, tune into it every now and again. So today I'm here as well. And yeah, I'm really glad to be here. And actually, that leads me to the next question to you is, you just sort of debunked something that people tend to get wrong about resilience. And, your line of work is also in resilience, as you mentioned briefly earlier. So I wonder if you've come across any other misconceptions. And, if you want to expand on what we just talked about, definitely go for it.
Well, that's a good question. Misconceptions about resilience. I mean, I think there's a number of them. One is people tend to think it's like a fixed quantity. You have a certain amount, and that's just not the case. It doesn't work that way. In fact, you can increase your resilience by having repeated exposure. One of the things that happens when people who face chronic hardship or, periodic hardship is that they, first of all, may not know they're resilient until they meet it. And they may discover they're not as strong as they thought they might have been in the face of it. Then they may discover that they become stronger because they kind of have to go through it. And then they may discover that the next time that something happens, whether it's kind of similar or even different, that they can use some of the same skills that they learned in the previous time, which is something you talked about kind of in the bounce back concept. It applies. It's not, it'll work there. And that their capacity to meet hardship in life, even independent of whatever it is, grows over time. So it's not a finite thing. It's not something you're born with a fixed quantity of, and you either have it or you don't, or you use it all up, or I don't know. It doesn't really work that way. Yeah. People can go through periods where they just feel like they had an experience and it just ground them down, and they were just not resilient in the face of it at all. And maybe that's how some of us end up feeling suicidal, right? It's like, we cannot do this. It's just way over what we can do. And then through the course of experience, you may find that you are doing it. You are surviving it. Every day you continue to wake up, and actually maybe over time, it gets a little and little easier to breathe. A little and little easier to be human, to be alive. And then you're like, wow, I actually have strength. I just had no idea that I had, and I don't feel like I did have it for a while. So it can grow and morph. It's kind of like it's its own entity, resilience is. So I think that's the misconception that I'll address for now.
Yeah, I think that's such a good one because someone said this to me a long time ago. I don't remember who, and I don't remember under which context, but it's more like resilience is like a muscle.
Yes.
It's just like you go to the gym to train your muscle, your body parts. Resilience is similar. If you think about the concept, it's similar to that, but it's more like it's intangible. So you cannot see the process, or you cannot see how big it is, but the more you train yourself, or you go through things that would allow you to build your resilience, the better it'll become. And I think that's sort of similar to what you just touched on. And for a lot of people, it's kind of like, again, as I said earlier, a lot of people might think, I'm just going to, I'll see how my resilience is when I encounter something. But I don't think so. You're not really. Because I feel like sometimes, and this is from my personal experience, sometimes I observe a lot of people who are willing to put themselves in situations where they have to learn more about their own resilience, and they have to, either bounce back or, find more strength, or get out of their comfort zone to do things that they're just, definitely not willing to do, and put themselves in hard situations even, like I think I won't go into details what exactly happened, but I feel like those little things definitely help a lot of people to build their personal resilience. And I guess in the context of today's topic as well, we might go a bit even further than that, and the conversation will get to a certain point, perhaps a little uncomfortable for some of us. But I feel like overall it's important to have this, to keep this in mind, and sort of like have it in your back pocket at all times, because it's easy to just go through your days and be like, I'll just live my days. I don't really worry about what else. But this is in the back of my mind a lot of the time. I'm just like, well, I mean, maybe this is my tendency to sort of like, I don't know, project manage my life or something. I'm just like, risk management, it's not going to go well forever. So, like might as well just like prepare myself for the dark days and whatnot. So I don't know. I think it's just something that a lot of people might resonate with, or some others might be like, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Well, I think I'm going to hook onto there just because one of the things I've noticed over the arc of time in my life is how many of us, me included, live our lives trying to avoid the things that are going to make us uncomfortable. And because we do that, and we're not conscious about it, we just instinctively do it. You're like, that person kind of, no, I'm just going to go over here. But we do that with situations, we do that with feelings, we do that all the time. And I will say that I've noticed in the more clinical side that people who have a tendency to try to live their life through what they're going to avoid, so their life ends up reflecting all the things they were trying to avoid. They end up having a harder time when inevitably something hard happens, because as you kind of mentioned in a minute ago, it's gonna, if you're going to live a human life, you're going to have some hard stuff. So it's actually a bit more advantageous to see if you can figure out where you're doing that, like where you're just instinctively avoiding a person, avoiding a conversation, avoiding a set of feelings, avoiding a set of memories or associations, and visit them gently, slowly, like visit them, try to go seek out opportunities to be uncomfortable so that you can kind of start the process of learning how to be with it while it's happening without trying to change it. And then, sort of take in the feelings of it and let yourself do what people do. And it kind of naturally happens to become resilient. So it's, you're probably going to be better off if you can let yourself gravitate to some discomfort over time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I totally, I was totally looking inwards when you said that. And I was like, oof, we're going to have a hard conversation tonight. When we do our journaling, what are we avoiding? It's going to be hard.
Just really quickly, you don't have to take it all in one fell swoop, because that's just overwhelming. And then you run away and you're like, never again. Yeah. Just start with a little piece.
Little by little.
Yeah, a little piece that feels like you can do it with it and see what happens.
Yeah. It's going to be a hard conversation, but it's, like you said, it's going to be worth it. So just visit it gently. I think that's a really nice way to describe how we're going to go about it.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's new for a lot of people, and our show is about education, and sometimes I like to convince our audience as well. So if anything to take from this conversation, first of all, try that, to visit areas where you tend to avoid, just gently, and see what happens. Because I can tell you, I realized some of those when you talked about that. I was like, okay, we're gonna have some work to do. So this is gonna be another project. Well, it's not gonna be entirely fun, but it's gonna be worth it. Just like going to the gym, not always fun, but will be worth it.
Yeah, exactly. It is like going to the gym, except you're exercising sort of your emotional flexibility and your cognitive flexibility and your energy flexibility. Exactly.
Yeah. Not a lot of people talk about that, though. I feel like that's such an interesting thing that we forget to do, because a lot of people go to the gym, but that's the physical, the work on your physical health. But what about this? things? Are you working on your mental health? And perhaps it'll relate to some of the things that we'll discuss now, because today's topic, again, is a hard one to talk about. We're talking about suicidal behaviors. We're talking about finding strength to live. And in the context of today's discussion, we really want to be, just as insightful as possible. And with your work, I wonder how you would, first of all, define suicidal behaviors, because, I relate to this as well. I remember growing up, when I went to middle school, I saw one of my friends cut herself. And I didn't see her in the act, but I sort of saw the aftermath of it. And I was actually scared for her, because we were not close. And as a kid, I didn't approach her and be like, hey, are you okay? But in my head, there was this thought lingering. I was like, is she suicidal? I don't know. I'm scared for her, and I'm scared to see that. But I don't know if she is actually suicidal or what else is happening. Because to me, at that point, when I was a kid, I was like, she seems suicidal. But I'm now, as an adult, I feel like maybe not. Perhaps that is something else, maybe a call for help. I wonder how you would define suicidal behaviors, and would self-injury harm be different from suicidal behaviors?
So two good questions. Suicidal behavior is, well, you can have a suicidal thought all the way up to a suicide attempt or completion, right? So it's usually on a continuum. So people will have thoughts of suicide, but they won't necessarily make a plan or write a note or make an attempt. So, and a lot of people, suicidal thoughts are pretty common, honestly, at some point or another, among people. Suicidal activity behaviors are less common. And as you get down to the attempts, they're even less common, but they're still uncomfortably common. We need to be doing more. And then non-suicidal self-injury is something that can look and feel like a suicide attempt to people who are looking on, like a friend. But it's really different. Let me just say it can be a red flag for suicidal thoughts or behaviors, non-suicidal self-injuries. But the distinction, and it's super important, is that most people who use non-suicidal self-injury use it to feel better. So the goal isn't to end life, not even close. It's the opposite of that. That's why it's really important that they be distinct, because I always tell parents and professionals with non-suicidal self-injury that the place it comes from is psychologically healthy and good place. You want to feel better. That's a good feeling. Like, yes, we want you to feel better. I want to help you feel better. It's just that path provides some short-term alleviation of discomfort sometimes for people, but it's really obviously not a good long-term strategy for feeling better. And suicide, of course, is an even worse long-term strategy for feeling better. That's the way I would define those.
Interesting. I think, obviously when you mentioned the suicide sort of spectrum, we are from having a thought to, final completion. That is, we'll go into more details, and that's sort of like not new to us, but for a lot of people, it's kind of like, well, I don't know how to deal with that information, first of all. Yeah. But then when it comes to the non-suicidal injury that you just mentioned, when you said some people do that to feel good, I'm like, well, this is new information to me.
Yeah. So the goal for, usually non-suicidal self-injury is undertaken to feel better. So people will feel really high levels of distress, or they'll feel dissociated, which means they just don't have any feeling at all. Beyond feeling emotionally numb, which I think all of us have had some experience with, feeling really dissociated is really terrifying. And so they'll self-injure in order to feel better or to kind of integrate with their body is what it will feel like to them. It doesn't work for everybody, but for the people that it works for, it can be effective in the short run. So it becomes a really habitual pattern thing that people will sometimes do in order to feel better.
Yeah, I understand. Well, this is not fun and game, but I think for me, it sounds like there's definitely a certain level of resilience that has to even go into the non-suicidal injury attempts that you just mentioned, because they wanted to feel better. Maybe this is going to be controversial, but from what I'm hearing, it sounds like for those people who are even committing those attempts, they truly wanted to work on it, or they wanted to bounce back, and that's their way of finding way back to who they were. So perhaps in a way that is like the example of resilience, but in the context of this, if you could share some thoughts on that, and also share a bit more about this relationship between resilience and suicidal behaviors, it would be really great, because again, for a lot of us this is new. A lot of us don't talk about this. We don't hear about it. We avoid conversations about this. So, what would be the role of resilience in all of this, and how does it look in real life? You've worked with, young adults, with people before who actually go through such experiences. So, what are your thoughts on this?
So the question is, what's the role of resilience? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think one of the most resilience and suicidal thoughts and behaviors are pretty intrinsically linked, because the path into health and wholeness, when you're sitting in that sort of forest of deep distress, is through resilience and connection and taking risks that you might not otherwise take, like reaching out for support, even if it feels like it's not going to be helpful, or sharing thoughts and perceptions and worries, or things that have happened that are hidden and nobody sees. A lot of, a high number of suicide impulses come from hidden things. There are things that somebody may have experienced or think about, or experiences they've had that they really never shared, or they've only shared really, really closely and without any kind of, it hasn't provided any relief. So they're going to have to probably be with discomfort and then reach out to others, or have some honest conversation with themselves sometimes around, just what, like, I want to live. I don't want to die. What do I need to do to get better? And whatever comes from that conversation, actually take the steps to do it. So when I talk to people, young people in particular, who've been through that journey, they all describe, every one of them describes a journey of resilience. And a lot of them start with having no idea that they could be resilient, or that they would be resilient, and certainly not feeling resilient at the beginning. Yeah. But over time, just usually over time, and then over a lot of dark nights of the soul, some reaching out, some sharing of things that were scary to share, lots of sort of being in discomfort moments, they can really and do work themselves into a really different space. It's inspiring, actually.
Yeah, it is. It is very inspiring, and I feel like there's hope there. And I have not encountered such a situation, but for anyone who might be going through something challenging, and they might have a suicidal thought, or even more than that, this might just be that hope, because a lot of people don't know that they have the resilience to go through the days, and like you said, go through the dark nights of the souls and just bounce back from it. It's going to be so much harder compared to the usual, I had a hard day. I had a hard day at work, I had a hard day with my relationships. It's very different from all of that. And I think it will take so much more work and energy just to even open up, to have a conversation, for example. I don't know much about other people who have gone through this, but I did encounter this one instance, and it was my first time, like, in my life, my first time ever encountering such a situation. And it was actually with one of my best friends here in Melbs. And we weren't in a friendship for that long, a few years, but she's definitely one of my best friends. And something happened not long ago, and I still remember that evening, because it still feels surreal to me now, because I picked up the phone, and immediately I heard crying. And I won't go into the story of why there was crying and things like that, but essentially what happened after the phone call is I went to her place, got her ice cream, and we talked about the situation. And she cried it out, she felt better. And then the next morning I called her again, because I've never seen her so down before. And this is my friend who's really sort of like happy-go-lucky, and just really positive overall. And the next morning, we had a call and I asked her, okay, how are you feeling now? Are you feeling better? And she said, yeah, I'm feeling better now. And then after chit-chatting for, I think about 10 more minutes, she said, I'm really glad you came yesterday because I actually started having suicidal thoughts. I don't know what I would have done had you not come. So that hit me really hard and I got really scared because first of all, I've never encountered such a feeling. So I never felt as strong as she did to sort of like started having suicidal thoughts. First of all, so I have to make that disclaimer. This is new to me. I'm not experienced in this area. But when I heard that, immediately I thought, what the actual heck? That was scary.
Yeah.
For her and for me. What would have happened if I hadn't picked up the phone? I don't know. So, like I think to me, it was like, I was so thankful that she reached out, first of all. And second of all, it was a lesson to me as well to learn that, okay, this could happen at any point. You don't know what's going to happen. And, it was good for her that she could bounce back from the situation. And it was good for me to learn from what happened in that moment as well. And also from me as a friend, just to remember to always reach out or, check in on my friends every now and again, because we don't know what's going to happen. It could be the best day of someone's life today and tomorrow something might change. So, yeah.
Gosh, there's so much in there. I'll just want to quickly comment on. One is yay you for reaching out, trusting your instincts, going over. That's cool. And it's one of the stories that I hear a lot. Like when you talk to people about their healing journey or their like before their healed journey and they're just sort of in the really hard part. Having other people notice you, care about you, reach out to you, even if they don't know all the details. Sometimes they don't even necessarily know that you're feeling so bad, but just if you have an instinct that somebody in your life is just, I don't know, if you have an instinct, follow it, just reach out and say, hey, thinking about you. It can make all the difference in the world for somebody who's really on a precipice. So that's awesome. And then the other thing is I think people one of the things you discover on that journey is you're stronger than you know. You really are. And the will to live is pretty strong, so that's why millions and millions and millions of people can have thoughts of suicide and never act on it. Because ultimately we want to live. So things have to be pretty systematically bad or, impulsively bad, usually for people that actually get to the point where they do end their lives. And other people really make a difference, like we just said. And then the other thing is, as I said earlier, people can grow. So those that experience of just having to meet that hardness, whatever the situation was for your friend, just whatever made her feel so bad, probably strengthened her in some ways. It can be overwhelming. Yeah. It can be so overwhelming that people can't deal with it. So that definitely happens. There's trauma that is just so big or so persistent that it overwhelms the human capacity to cope. But when we get it in sort of doses, hard moments or hard situations in doses, those things are part of what grow us up too. They're kind of all mixed together.
Yeah, that's such a good point because previous to that experience, I never thought much of it. I've heard about other people having suicidal attempts. I've obviously seen some TV shows here and there and, read stories, but having that experience firsthand just to see someone, truly taught me a lesson, just like you said. And, the healing journey is going to take time. But there's definitely growth in that. And I can confirm that because I saw my friends after that situation much happier, just much happier and more resilient and just more positive about life in general. Because, instead of focusing on what went wrong, she really decided to change her perspective. And a lot of that actually stemmed from our conversation. And again, I can be positive, but I'm not always positive. So I'm just glad that in our conversation, she took away some things from it. And she just said, well, okay, now I know I just need to work on this part, do this, that, and then I'm going to get sorted. So yeah, focusing on the solution. Obviously, it was hard for her to go through that process because I'm not going to say what it was, but it's challenging, when she felt like there was no way out and she, finally found a solution, a path to, continue on with her life and enjoy life again. Like, that just made me so happy. But, for a lot of people, it's not the same, right? Because again, we're talking about other people, network, having the care and support from others. So I think the next question is actually sort of related to perhaps parts of what we just discussed, because this is one instance, right? What I told you is one story. And in your line of work, I'm sure you've encountered so many instances, not just stories, but, people that you meet with firsthand. So I wonder, in your research, in your work, how common is this? How common is suicidal behaviors in our society, or perhaps where you focus your study on?
Yeah, well, it's shifted a little bit. I mean, it's at this point about, well, and it also depends on whether we're talking, at least here in the States. I can talk about the States better than any place because that's where I do my work. I'd say about last year in 2021, 2022, we had about 20% young people saying that they'd ever had any suicidality. So that includes thoughts and behaviors but attempts are a fairly small portion of those. But there are a good number of people every year, every day, who consider it in one form or another. They may even sort of start thinking about the details. And then, it can either progress or pass, like the acute nature of it can pass. Yeah, and they may or may not revisit it. But I think suicidal ideation is fairly common. As I said, there's a good number of people who will visit it in their mind when something really hard happens. But for most people, it is a fleeting thought in a moment of real deep hardship. And then, and then something happens and you go on with your life.
Wow. That's I don't know. It's just an insane statistic to hear.
No, it's pretty big.
I don't know what to say. Yeah. Cause I mean, that's just the States. What about other countries,
I know. I'm actually going to quickly look that up, actually.
Yeah, I think while you're looking that up, I think one thing that I would love to share and maybe hear your perspective on is, this is related to our next question. What actually causes such behaviors? Because you said, right, there's a whole journey to it. There's first of all the thought, and then perhaps some I don't know, like perhaps even some planning about it, and then finally the attempt and succession going through with it. Now I saw this. I've been seeing this Korean TV shows, and most of it's about education. And I know this about Korea, that they're really focus on studies and really serious about how they get into universities and things like that. And this is obviously a TV show, but I know that in real life it happened as well, because this is quite infamous in South Korea, that a lot of young adults committed suicide just before they go through the entrance exam to university or something of the equivalent, because of the stress. And I know that this is true. And, I mean, I'm not going to say for anybody else. I just know that I saw this on the news every now and again. And, from that TV shows, I just got reminded. And I remember that they told the story of this, this girl who's, I think, in grade 12, and she's about to, go through her entrance exam. And then one day she committed suicide. She just left a note to her favorite teacher saying that, you've been the strength for me. But unfortunately, I've been trying to be positive, but, I've had enough. And, that triggered her to, actually go through with it. And I think that was heartbreaking for sure. But that just leads me back to the question, sometimes we still have one or two people who still care about us, who will still help us to go through anything and sort of be that strength and be our mental support. But a lot of people, even with that, they still went through with suicidal attempts. So I wonder what actually triggers it, because a lot of the time there's got to be some sort of triggers.
Yeah. Okay. We're just quickly looking at some data, though. Let me just quickly tell you that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. We love more data.
So I collected this, or I looked at this was like 5 or 6 months ago. So globally, 1 in 7 teens aged 10 to 19 experience a mental disorder in general. Suicide is the 4th leading cause globally of death among 15 to 19-year-olds. So it's
really
pretty
heartbreaking.
significant. Yeah, and I think it really depends. It's really variable by country, but the biggest burden is in countries with more challenges, basically.
Yeah.
With less wealth and just it's harder to live. So what gets people there? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of things can, but you touched on a big one, feelings of failure or anticipated failure, especially since people often assume that their failure is going to disappoint people that they love or that they don't want to disappoint, like parents or other adults in their system. It's like chronic perpetual feelings of distress. So sometimes you'll find people who have, really hard family lives, for example, they're being abused or there was there's hidden stuff in the family that's just really damaging. So they're dealing with that chronically growing up, and it just starts to feel like they can't handle it anymore. It's overwhelming. They don't see a path to a life where they can thrive and grow.
Yeah.
So those are the most common feelings from the inside that people have.
Yeah. Well, I just want to take a pause there to take it all in, because that's a lot, especially when you mention young adults. They probably don't have this information in the first place, and
the hard part about it is that for people who have become suicidal, there's a lot of really understandable reasons. Like, you hear the stories of life and you just think, wow, that is really hard. That is really intense. But sometimes there isn't an obvious path out. What do you say to a young person who's being chronically abused by a parent and they're still a minor and they can't, that's tough. Like, there are some it's more than tough. There's some really sincere barriers that to living full open-bodied living that a lot of people have. Time really makes a big difference for but it's just a matter, sometimes it's hard to feel like that, like you have that many, it's like just a few years. And so time, reaching out to get help, maybe sometimes you have to share secrets that you wouldn't otherwise share in order for somebody to be able to help you and know, and that can make an enormous difference, honestly, to not have to carry the burden yourself. But it takes courage and it takes strength. It takes resilience to get to the point where that in order for you to live, you're going to need to wade into really uncomfortable territory. And sometimes that means, like I said, disclosing things that are big family secrets or just, or that you've never said anything to anybody about, or just reaching out in general and saying to somebody, I'm suffering and I need help. I need to not be alone in this. That takes a certain amount of strength in the beginning. And then hopefully, people can be met with at least enough support to kind of figure out how to make it manageable for the moment. And then slowly over time to be able to fully get out of whatever situation it is that seems to be triggering it.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned is definitely sort of some strategies for people who might need some help right now. But what I notice is we don't have a lot of young listeners on the show. And it sounds to me like, young adults get impacted a lot. And they tend to be the ones, having suicidal thoughts or even behaviors nowadays, perhaps in other age groups as well. But since you mentioned the young adults group, I'm wondering if we're parents or if we are engaged with young adults on a daily basis, what can we do to notice when things go wrong and what can we do to help?
Okay, I'll come back to that. But you're right. I hadn't actually really, I almost always get asked to talk about young adult and adolescent mental health, not everybody. But if we're going to talk about everybody for a moment, then I will let you know and let your listeners know that the group at highest risk for suicide is actually middle-aged men.
Mm.
And that seems to be generated by, I don't know, it can be feelings of low worth, especially if they get let go or they're unable to provide when they feel like they should, or it's just you. But that is really the group that's at especially the highest risk.
Wow.
And
also, that's also scary to hear, but yeah, good to know. Definitely.
Yeah, it is. It is good to know. And oftentimes it's silent. Like they really just, one of the things I know now that I'm middle-aged is I've had enough experience. Like, if I don't want you to know how I feel, you really won't know how I feel.
Yeah.
So it's much easier for me to mask these days just because I have more experience doing that. So I think it is challenging with full-grown, middle-aged people who they just tend, especially men, they tend to often be quiet. They won't let anybody know that they're suffering. And then there's all of the stigma that men in general face around just, having emotions, let alone sharing that they're having them. So it's tricky.
Yeah.
It's harder than I think than adolescents in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, maybe we can tweak the previous question that I just threw at you and share this from a broader perspective. Obviously young adults, adolescents, and I was asking about parents and people who, engage with them on a daily basis or maybe frequently. But if we were to be broader in that sense than just anyone, then, how can we notice this in anyone, just our friends or people in our networks or family? How can we notice the signs and what can we do to help?
Okay, noticing is good. So first of all, first and foremost, trust your gut. Just trust your gut. Even if, you're like, they seem normal, if your instincts are saying something's off here, you got to trust it. That's A. B, the kinds of things that you might notice, subtle or not, would be change in affect, meaning emotion. So somebody can appear more withdrawn, more sad, less engaged in general. Like the thing that will really drive suicide is a sense of hopelessness. So if you start to really notice your friend or your loved one expressing or not, just feeling more hopeless, either they're talking about that or you can find they're disengaging from their lives in some ways that are meaningful, especially things that, matter a lot to them. Those are some signs. And it's not just signs of suicide potential. It's those are the signs we would tell you to look for somebody who's depressed or just struggling. And in all cases, the best thing to do is ask. Just ask. I would ask, tell somebody what you notice. It seems like I know you really well. It looks like you're doing okay, but it doesn't feel that way. It seems like you're more withdrawn. It's hard. You talk a lot less to me. I feel like you're just way deep inside yourself. Whatever it is, describe what it is using I statements that you're noticing. Say, I care, I love you, however you say that, just communicate it. And then ask, are you feeling suicidal? Have you had thoughts of suicide or ending your life? Are you struggling with feeling down or blue? And then ask what you can do to help. Sometimes a person will know, sometimes they won't know. A lot of times if you're feeling really down, you just don't know what people can do. So don't be surprised if they're like, oh man, I'm good, don't worry about it. I would tuck that away, but don't believe it. And then I would start figuring out, how am I going to support my friend or my loved one? So depending on the situation, it could be like they may clearly not be fully suicidal, just, going through a hard period. And then based on what I know about them, I probably just consistently check in with them, reach out and check in. It doesn't mean every time, how are you? Because sometimes when somebody's struggling, they don't want to give up, daily reports. Maybe they do, but often it can also just be thinking about you. Do you want to go grab some coffee? Thinking about you. Do you want to go do something? Okay, one caveat, we've just been talking about men, going out and getting drinks when somebody is not doing well emotionally is not a good idea. Alcohol and suicidal impulses do not mix at all. In fact, it makes it easier. So I would not, don't say, hey, do you want to go get drunk tonight or go to the bar tonight? I would not do that. I would actually stay away from that, do things that entail that get good, healthy food, get nature, get exercise in their bodies, because those are the kinds of things that are going to enhance capacity for resilience, usually.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And thank you for mentioning that. Because for a lot of us, we might think alcohol solves everything, especially if we don't know about this. So this insight would be very helpful, and even in the context of us going through tough times, best to stay away from alcohol if possible, and try and do something else that might be good for the body, like you said. Be in nature, do some activities. It's really common for friends who are like, let's just go out and party, get your mind off things. But if somebody's really authentically struggling, meaning that they're not just having an off day, that's a really bad idea. Well, thank you so much for mentioning that. Very important point. And to kind of round this out, now let's go back to ourselves and, look inwards. The question that I really want to ask is related to us coping. So again, anything can happen. We know that we can reach out to other people. We know that we can share what's going on and share the struggle and ask for help. But what else can we do? In a sense of working on this ourselves. And our team used the word, I think, very interesting, a more adaptive mechanism to deal with triggers. I found that to be such an interesting phrase. But what are your thoughts? What can we try to do?
Yeah, there's a lot, actually. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we're all kind of with ourselves, right? We kind of get born with ourselves, we'll die with ourselves, and we go through life in between. There's lots of people around we hope and we love, but it's really, So it's important. So one thing is just get honest with yourself. Just nobody's around, nobody's listening. If you feel like you're struggling, say, I'm struggling. And because sometimes just admitting vulnerability for people is really hard, and they don't even know that they're struggling. They're resisting just admitting that they feel like they've been floored or they're just like down. It's okay. It's more than okay. Actually, that's the path to strength. True strength is recognizing when you're vulnerable and saying, I am open to the universe, whoever you open to, just like, I need help. And I'm struggling. So that's one, just get honest. And then, to the extent that you can get honest about what's going on with yourself and what the feelings are, I really recommend that. It can really help to just write it down. Or sometimes, I'll speak it into my phone, to the recorder. If I don't want to write, sometimes I might want to walk. Like when COVID first hit, I remember it's like, I gotta move. I don't have there's a lot of anxiety when we were first all in COVID, right? Those first few weeks. So I would just go out and walk, but I would record a journal entry while I was walking. So that can really be helpful. Just see what you can do to let things come up and out, whatever it's going to be. Free associate, whatever. Nobody's listening, nobody's reading. You don't have to share with anybody. It's just you. That's one thing. And then the other thing would be to use the practices. So one is like, when you need help, if it's just too much, you can't think clearly. Like, it's like, maybe there's a path out of the situation, but you don't really know what it is. Get help and reach out. It doesn't have to, it can be a friend or a therapist, somebody that might be able to think from the outside with you. Cause a lot of times there are outside perspectives that are helpful that we don't think about. And then beyond that, it's you really are well advised to take good care of your body while you're doing this. So if I'm struggling, I make sure that I have enough space in my life for healthy sleep. Sometimes when you're struggling, you sleep too much. So you have to be got to balance activity with rest. But make sure I get regular, healthy sleep. Make sure that I'm not eating junk food, because that actually makes things a lot worse. Even though the tendency is to eat the carbs and eat the sugar and eat the things that are going to make you feel good for a minute, Not a great idea.
Yeah.
Make sure you're eating healthfully. And then time in nature really helps if it's possible. Not everybody lives in a place where they can access it, but most of us have sky and birds and trees usually, or water. If you can find your way to nature, it can be very grounding and helpful. Beyond that, we recommend things like breath work, because a lot of times when we get really stressed out, we just kind of leave. It's like we just leave our bodies. We don't really, I don't know, we're separated from our bodies. It can be really, really helpful. Just take deep breaths to feel it go into your lungs slowly, and then have it slowly go out. Actually, just doing that regularly when you feel like you're stressed, 3, 4, 5, however many you can before your mind wanders off to do something else, can really help down regulate and calm people down. And then beyond that, there's other things like expression. Usually when somebody's suicidal or depressed, there's something that isn't spoken, or there's some set of feelings that haven't gotten out that need to come out in some way. And it don't all have to be through words. Like for me, words are like the thing I do, right? It's kind of the way but not everybody's that way. So art, color, get canvas and put color on it. Just, drawing, music, sound. Sound is really powerful. You may want to like turn on the highest amp, I don't know, intense sound that you can, but try the opposite. Try finding the sounds that soothe you and make a playlist, so that when you're feeling amped up or agitated, it can actually calm you down. Music is super, super powerful. Water is really, really powerful for a lot of us. So if you have access to water and you can take a bath, or you can, sometimes there's been certain periods where I just didn't have access to a lot of my tools. So I would just go get in the shower and like sit in the shower and let the water run. Yeah. Do I feel uplifted and great? Usually no, but do I get a little bit of spaciousness? Yes. That's what we're looking for. You're not looking for a remedy right then. You're just looking for just a little bit more than I had before. So, and then the last thing would be just pay attention to you, to yourself. Like, what are the things you learned about yourself that are going to give you authentic spaciousness? Yeah. And try to not, the tendency will be like, none of this is working. Nothing's going to work, blah, blah. That's the tendency. The mind is going to want to do that. You have to just say, that's not true. It's not true. It's the one place where you have to tell yourself it is not true. Yeah. Things do help. And I want to live. I want to feel better. So I'm going to go against what you're telling me and try these things, come along. Yeah. Those are some initial thoughts.
Yeah. Lots of tips, lots of, practical things that everyone can try if ever they encounter such a situation where they needed some tools. So I think you've equipped people with a lot of tools. And I really like the fact that you said, it's going to work for you. Like for you, it's words. For other people, it might be music, painting, other things. For some people, it might be dancing,
movement. That's another thing. Movement is very helpful. Our bodies will often feel a lot better. So exercise, or just moving, like just walking, or sometimes if you're, there've been times where if I'm in bed and it's like the middle of the night and I start to feel anxious, I'll just like do this like pedaling with my feet back and forth, and the rhythm of it is helpful. Like whatever, just try anything and see if you get a little bit of a relief, and then stick with that and add to it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good advice that anyone can try. I think the most important thing that I picked up from all of this is you just got to keep these tools in mind for when you need it. Because, it's easy to say, I know exactly what to do. And then in such situations, sometimes the last thing you want to do is to actually try, right? So, I think it's just an important thing to keep in mind, that you have tools that you can use and you can just do that are so simple that, let's not forget about them. And I think that is sort of like you covering the practice part that we were supposed to talk about. So, thank you. Instead of giving us one practice, you sort of gave us 20, I would say. And I really love all of them. I love all of them. So maybe we can do this. Maybe let's pick one for someone. So, just for when they're struggling, they're like, I don't remember anything that Janis said, because she said so many things, but I've forgotten it all. So if we were to really emphasize on one thing that they can do at that very moment when they're like, I'm feeling hopeless, there's nothing to work for anymore, like I'm done. What is the one thing practically that they can do at that very moment to help them?
Gosh, that's a tough question, but I think I'm going to say breathe.
Yeah, I was thinking the same.
Really breathe. Yeah. And when you breathe, see if you can just bring your awareness to the breath. And by that, like, breathe in all the way into your belly. Start, like you breathe into your belly first, and then your chest, and then up top. And you can feel, like, I can instantly feel the air going into my lungs. It's really nice. Like, it's like, oh yeah. And then you can slowly let it out, either through your mouth or through your nose, and do that as many times as you can. See if you can also kind of move your fingers together. It'll bring your attention down to your fingers, and often away from the thoughts. So, and then so that's the one thing I would do. But I want to add one more little practice that can be helpful, and that is what we would call a mantra practice. So a mantra is basically something you repeat, and there's like there's mantras in most spiritual traditions of one sort or another. But this can be that. This can be something that you have used and that you like, but it can also be a mantra of the feelings you want to have right then or soon, right? Yeah. So, for example, there was a period not long ago where I was having challenge with some people, and it was causing me distress, and it was causing us distress. It was some work-related stuff. And so I just started in my mind, whenever I started to worry about it, when I was driving or whatever, I said, peace, love, compassion, and understanding. Peace, love, compassion, and understanding. And as I said it, I would feel those things a little bit. And as I just continued, like I would say when I was driving, like I could do a half hour of peace, love, compassion, understanding, be standing in line. And while I'm waiting, like peace, love, compassion, understanding. But one of the two cool things, one is I wasn't chewing on the bad stuff, because I was saying this. A mantra often gives the mind something to do too. But the other thing that's really cool, and you choose whatever words or word combinations work for you, is so like those were just mine given the situation. Every time I say the word or some word, like especially when I said compassion, I could feel compassion inside me for me, and I could feel compassion for the people and the other two people involved in the situation. And that feeling just soothed me. It just soothed me, no matter whether it changed anything in the physical world, although it did. It was pretty cool the way that it did. It was really neat. I noticed it seemed to have changes in my relationship, even because when I came to the next conversation, I'm like, I'm just going to repeat this in my head over and over and over. And I was different, and things were calm, and it worked out beautifully. So breath in mantra can be maybe a very helpful technique to start with. And then, of course, I have to always say, reach out for support. Even you don't have to give everybody all the details. You can just have a friend or a loved one say, I'm having a hard time. Can we go for a walk or go see a movie? Or, just don't be completely alone in it all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally relate with that. Because, this is, we have a bunch of questions in this section, as you might see, right? But I think they're not super applicable because you already covered all the very important parts of it. And if anything, to leave listeners with, to truly embrace the practice that you just shared. I do want to share my little story as well. This is my personal experience. It wasn't associated with any suicidal behaviors or attempts or even a thought, but this was me feeling the most down last year when I lost my cat. And what basically happened was I was in bed crying most of the time, and I was still working, to kind of get my mind off of it. But obviously, I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to do anything. Didn't want to function apart from, because work. I have to work to, take care of the other cats. Right. So,
Right.
Did not have the opportunity to take a break, and still also, like, I felt like in a way, like, I don't think this is a suicidal thought, but in a way, I just wanted everything to stop, and I didn't want to do anything. So fortunately for me, I told some friends about this, and I wasn't the one reaching out. But what my friends did for me, I'm just really, truly thankful, is every morning someone would be like, "Are you up? Get out of bed, go for breakfast with me." And that really helped, because we would get back from breakfast and then I would get on with my work day. By the end of it, another friend would be like, "How's your day been? Want to have dinner? I'm going to cook for you." So I'm constantly surrounded by my loved ones, and I do not have the time to keep sulking. I mean, there was a lot of crying involved, and it took a really long time for me to get over it. But I think the moral of the story is, if we have the right people in our lives, it will truly work out. And even if we don't, just having the strength to, like you said, do things for ourselves, take care of ourselves, go out. Because what I found to be truly helpful is, obviously, when my friend left, I was on my way home alone.
Yeah.
But I did feel a little better, just a little better,
Yeah.
by being outside of my home.
Yeah. Changing your environment can really, really help, So, and then, like, if I'm really down and I can't get anywhere, well, when I used to have Twitter, I don't really have Twitter anymore. But when I did, I used to scroll through and look at the sweet animal videos or whatever, right? And it's amazing how it really does.
Yeah.
It does kind of open. Go to a cat cafe. Be around be around animals of some sort. That can make a really big difference. But just moving. I mean, that's one of the things around non-suicidal self-injury that people tell us how they stop is they learn when they start to get the urge to just move the environment, so that they're home, they might go out for a walk. And at least with non-suicidal self-injury, the impulse typically ends after, or starts to diminish after about 20 minutes. So if you can move somewhere else, doing something, if you can move, it really does help to move your body for 20 minutes or so, or be talking to a friend or something like that. It can really make a big difference.
Yeah, that's a great point. That 20 minutes might be very important for some of us. So thank you for sharing that. I've taken a lot of great points from today. I'm just going to let it all sink in. And I think we can definitely learn a new thing, at least a new thing today. Just try something different for ourselves, and even just learn about the statistic. It's just, I mean, I don't know what to say about that statistic. I truly hope that if anyone's listening to this and they're kind of having some reflection on the current situation at home, at work, or with their friends, or even within themselves, I truly hope that it will change something, even just a small thing, because a lot of the time these little thoughts pop up because of a trigger, because of something that goes wrong, or because you just don't find any way out, and you just start having these thoughts. So hopefully today we provide our listeners with some tools and to help them change their perspectives, even just a little bit. Yeah. So that is what we have covered. We actually had some questions from the audience, but actually, you know what? You covered them all. I have questions here because how can we help others? We already covered that, and maybe just one little question from our audience that we have not really covered. I find this one to be really good. Is what are some things we should not tell people who exhibit suicidal tendencies or a lack of will to live?
One. Yeah, I love that. First of all, don't tell them, "Oh, it's okay, it's not a big deal, it'll pass." Don't tell them that. Don't tell them, "Oh, don't worry about it." Yeah. Or why don't you just go do blah, blah, blah. Don't try to give them advice to make it better. Just listen. Just what you want to communicate is tell me I'm here, or talk to me, or, I know that life can be really hard, and there's space for it. Okay. So don't tell them they'll get over it in any way, shape, or form, or that it's not as intense as it feels like it is to them. Mm-hmm. If you're really worried about your friend or your loved one being actively suicidal, then don't leave them. Even if you have to make excuses to stay, sorry about that. Even if you have to make excuses to stay, don't leave them. So yeah, because you just never know. And sometimes it can get kind of acute, especially if it's at night or something. You just want to make sure that they're not alone and that they have the supports they need. What else? I think we covered it. You really just want to make space for the experience. You don't want to minimize or dismiss. That's the biggest mistake people make, especially guys with men with other men. They're like, oh, dude, it'll get better. Da, 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 da. And that may be true, but for some people, it really isn't true. And it just ends up feeling like, basically, when you say that, you're basically saying, I'm not available to talk to about this because I don't think it's a big deal.
Yeah. Very important points. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think this question is such a good one. Yeah. From all the audience questions, this really caught my eyes. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. Also important for us to interact with people in the right way, because we don't want to be, as much as we would like to help, we also don't want to be the cause of it. Because sometimes it can be the little things that people say that triggers others. That's what I've noticed. And that's also very dangerous. So yeah, we want to do our part as well, and be a good friend, be a good colleague, be a good family member, and whoever we can be. So that really, really this time has really wrapped up all of the questions for you about the topic. I'm sure you can go on about it, and I can go on about it with you as well, because I feel like there's even more to cover. But in the interest of time, we respect your time. We're so grateful you're here. So we just want to wrap this up really nicely and ask you to share with us something in the section we called Open Mic, something that you're passionate about, or something that has really got your interest these days. And you mentioned something to me earlier that I think would be a really good topic. So Janis, go for it.
Well, I don't know how much open mic is open mic, but basically when you and I spoke about it, I said that one of the things I'm really paying attention to these days is just how different this time feels and is. So as somebody who I was born in the 60s, so a long time ago. And I now have half of my life pre-2000, and will probably have about half post-2000. So I've gotten to see and feel a lot of what the world has felt like during that time. And as everybody knows, it's just been a lot of changes, right? Since then, including introduction to the internet and so forth. But I'm really, really noticing that as we sort of inch our way closer to 2030, there's just a lot of political instability. There's a lot of earth changes. There's a lot of big things that feel like they're overwhelming, and we don't really know what's happening. And I'm watching, as everybody, but especially since I pay attention to young people in particular, I'm watching rates of anxiety and self-injury and depression and suicidality just climb, because I think there's just a lot of uncertainty about what's happening in general, So I'm wondering where that's going to go. I'm wondering whether the ways that we understand even mental health are going to have to change, because we typically, for example, tend to think about mental health as starting in the person, or at least in the person's life. But I feel like we're at a stage now where the external environment, whether it's climatological changes, political changes, just like the global instability, pandemics, possibility for more, is so present in the larger environment that we're starting to reflect, our levels of anxiety are starting to reflect that. So for example, if you have a fish in a really dirty tank, the fish is going to get sick. It's not because the fish has problems or would have, so I'm feeling like we are probably at a point where we have to start looking at how all of this is affecting even what we would think of as sort of healthy, functional humans. that aren't otherwise struggling or their struggles wouldn't otherwise make a lot of sense. And then what do we do about that? So that's a much bigger question, but that is the thing that I chew on probably the most, is this question. Because obviously you can't tell a fish just breathe. And I mean, you can. Well, actually, it may not make a lot of sense to a fish, but you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, I know
these exercises can be helpful, and they probably are at the end of the day, no matter what, helpful. Even if the world was coming to an end, you probably just breathe because what can you can't control. Yeah. But, as somebody who's really interested and worried about or thoughtful about how we create environments that are healthy for people and also for other species and the planet. Yeah. I have larger questions that are at this point not answerable, but a lot of the stuff that I read and watch and think about is in that domain. At this point.
Exactly. Which is why I said to you earlier, all of the things that you shared, not recommendations per se, but things that inspire you, they have a theme, and I could kind of sense that. And really thank you for sharing a lot of your, not just your insights, but your personal interest and passion today. I'm really inspired by our conversation, and I think as much as we've provided our listeners with the tools, I've picked up a few things from it as well. I hope everyone enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Yes. And just before we let you go, where can our listeners find out about your work? And, if you would like to share anything else with us before you go, please do.
Oh, it's a really good question. I don't, probably the best thing I don't have a website that's just for me. I keep thinking I should do that, but I don't know. I just don't. You can go to my LinkedIn page if you want to find out more about me to some degree, and you can reach out to me through there. And then you can also go to self-injury and recovery resources. If you just Google Cornell and self-injury, I think my website comes up, and we have lots and lots of resources for non-suicidal self-injury and that kind of thing. And I think you can contact me through there too.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And thanks again for being here. I wish we could continue talking about this topic, even though it's such a hard topic to talk about, because I think it's truly important. But given the topic that you just shared earlier, I have a feeling that you might want to start even an even bigger project for yourself. So maybe, I'm just saying, not sure, maybe in 5 years, we'll see a whole piece of different research, and you're probably in a whole different domain by then.
Yeah, that'd be nice, actually. I'd like that.
We don't know what's going to happen. So definitely, we would love to have you back sometimes. But today has been really great. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Lou. I really appreciate it. It's been great.
You have been listening to Bouncing Back, the Personal Resilience Science Insights podcast, produced by the Life Management Science Labs. Listen to episodes from LMSL's 10 Life Management Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or other podcasting apps on your smartphone. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps others find us and us grow to bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at pr.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Tia Harmer. Thanks for tuning in.